Today, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about N8N Webhooks, taking you from beginner to pro. Many people misunderstand webhooks, but once you know how to use them, you can create some pretty cool architecture, workflow architectures within N8N. So if that sounds like something you'll be interested in, then be sure to stick around. So before I head into the N8N instance, what I'm actually going to show you guys is what a webhook actually does. Because I think some people overcomplicate what webhooks actually do. Essentially, what webhooks do is they send data from one place, let's call it app A, to another place, call it app B. And the webhook is this section in the middle here. This is the webhook. A webhook will format this data from app A and put it into app B, or format it nicely to be put into app B. So a practical example of this would be something like, and a common example of this, of a webhook in action, is a webhook might watch for a form response or form responses. I'm going to copy this over. And then the webhook will format those form responses nicely and then put the form responses into something like a CRM. And the CRM, the data you'll put in the CRM might be things like the first name, the last name, the company name, their email address, etc. All of these things the webhook will be formatted to be put into your CRM nicely. It moves a message from app A, from form response, to app B, your CRM, to add a new record into your CRM with the first name, last name, company name, email, etc. And it just formats that response, and it does this all instantly. And it's super powerful to be able to do this instantly. What I mean by instantly is as soon as the form response is submitted, the webhook will start. This is extremely powerful as opposed to something like a schedule trigger. It saves a lot of operations in N8N, which is always nice to see. Now, what do these webhooks actually look like in N8N? Well, if you create a new workflow, add first step, search in webhook, we have two nodes here. We have webhook and respond to webhook. First off, the webhook node itself, this is what watches, this is what retrieves the data. This is what retrieves the data on a form response. As soon as a form is submitted, the responses will be sent to this webhook instantly. The webhook is constantly watching for whatever you've specified it to watch. And then the respond to webhook node, oh, that's the same node. Respond to webhook. It's pretty much in the name. It responds to the webhook. When a user submits data to this webhook, where do you want that user to be to see after they have created that webhook? Do you want them to be navigated to your website? Do you want them to be navigated to a custom web page, which I'll show you later on in this video? And yeah, there's multiple things you can do with this node. But first off, I want to show you the webhook node, what triggers the flow. So if we enter this node, the first thing you'll see is a test and production URL. These are the URLs that you use to trigger this webhook. These are unique URLs to trigger your webhook in your N8N workflow. You have test URLs to use when you're testing, production URLs to use when you set the automation or workflow, whatever you like to call it, live. Sometimes I'll forget to turn the test URL to production URL, so remember to turn it to production when you turn your automation on. Then moving down, you have an HTTP method. There's multiple different methods. These are methods that people a long time ago, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago, agreed upon to specifying how to send data to and from webhooks and to and from HTTP requests. And then they came up with these methods. 99% of the time, you'll be using GET and POST requests. I'll also get a bit more into that later on. The path, this is a unique path, or the path to this URL. This is live, so if I change this, you can say this is the path, and you can see in this URL here that has updated live there. So this is the path. But for now, I'm going to change that to and keep that at random letters. Then you have authentication. Just think of authentication as a password, how you have a password to unlock your phone, you have a password to unlock your computer, and so on. This is essentially what authentication is. It's a password to use your webhook. It's a password that it's a password to say that you can only use this webhook if you know the password. Otherwise, you can't use it. That's all authentication is. You have different types of authentication, basic and header auth, JSON web token auth. I'm not going to get too much into that as it's a bit more complicated, a bit more complex. And once you know header and basic auth, that's all you really need to know. And then you can have no authentication in practice, in testing. I always use no authentication really. I just haven't found the need to use basic or header auth. The reason you would use passwords is because once this webhook is exposed, especially the production URL, anyone on the web can use it. So that's why you'll want to use authentication. There's also a respond section. What you can do is you can respond immediately. You can respond when the last node finishes. So imagine you have a sequence of 30 nodes in your workflow. The last node, the very last node in that workflow, so the 30th node, would be what triggers and responds to this webhook, to the user, with data that you specify. Then finally, we have a using respond to webhook node. This is what I'm going to go into more depth about later on in the video. For now, I'm going to keep it at immediately. Then we have some other options here. Zoom back in. Some of these don't really need to know about because I've never really used them, and in practice you'll never really use them. What I usually do is I will turn on ignore bots just to ensure that bots don't suddenly start using the the webhook. You can choose IP addresses. IP's whitelist is just specifying different IP addresses that I believe it's IP addresses you only want allowed. Yeah, allowed IP addresses. IP addresses, the computer addresses, I believe. IP address, what is it? Unique string, yeah, each computer on the internet. So it's just a unique ID for your computer that uses an internet. And then we have no response body. You can respond with nothing. You can make it so the data you receive is raw instead of formatted nicely. Response code, response data, response header, response data. You can respond with the message that you want the user to see. And then there is one more. Response code. You can specify the response code. This can be pretty cool. You can choose and specify the code that you want the response to be. Not found, forbidden, unauthorized, bad requests, not modified, found, etc. So that can be pretty cool. But what we're going to do first is specify the webhook URL and look into how can you send requests to the webhook URL in the easiest way possible. So the easiest way, I'm going to show you three methods. The first method is you can copy this URL, listen for test event, and it's by simply pasting it into your browser, clicking enter, workflow has started. So this is what I was talking about before, where anyone can have access to this URL, no matter the account, the authorization, anyone can do this if you don't have a password. And you can see if we head back into the webhook node in N8N, I haven't passed any data through to this webhook, but it's already gathered quite a lot amount of data about me, just from my default browser data in Chrome. If we look here, what do we have? We have the computer I have, we have the browser I'm using, the cookie authorization, we have all this default data browsing information from Google Chrome that the webhook has just received, which is pretty cool. Might be a bit concerning to some people that we can now have access to this data for free. But apart from that, if we close the headers and the parameters and query, these are currently empty because this is where the messages we pass through the webhooks will be sent to. And then it also specifies the webhook URL and the execution mode. Currently it's in test mode, not production. Now, how can we actually send data to this webhook? Well, we can do it if we copy this, listen for test event, by pasting the URL into your browser, going question mark, and then you can do something like first name equals Seb, and if you want to add another field, last name equals Gardner. You enter that, workflow is started, come back in here. Now you can see under query, we have that first name and that last name. That first name equals Seb and last name equals Gardner. Now we can use these as dynamic variables for our flow in N8N. So it's pretty cool. And you can do add as many data points as you want by just doing where's and maybe you want company name as well. Company name equals savvy flow. You can imagine you can do as many data points, add as many data points as you want here. Now we have company name, which is pretty cool. Now another way you can send data to a webhook is by using this path. So instead of specifying it in the URL, what we can do is in here we can add a colon, add a whatever header you want. So maybe this is the first name, and then do /colon last name /colon company name. You can imagine how you can do this as many times as you want. You could do /colon just like we did in the browser. Now what happens is if we copy this, listen for test event, you can also copy the URL here, head into this browser, paste this here. You can see here's that path we've added, the first name, the last name, the company name. Now what we can do is replace this first name with Seb. It's my first name, last name, Gardner, company name, Savvyflow. We enter this, the exact same thing has happened, just a little bit of a different method. In practice, I don't generally use this method because it's a bit more time consuming. It's a bit less easy for me anyway. Might not be for you. But you can see here now, instead of it being in query, it's in parameters, and we've got first name, last name, company name, which is specified here, Seb Gardner Savvyflow. But in practice, I don't generally do this. I'll keep it the same and then do it this way where I go question mark, first name equals Seb and etc. That's what I'll do in practice. Now, some other ways you can send data to this webhook is using something like an HTTP request. So if you create a new workflow in N8N, search an HTTP, and then paste the webhook URL in here, we can open this up and then go question mark, the exact same thing as we did in the browser. First name equals Seb and last name equals Gardner. Close this off. Listen for test event. Run this. We get the exact same message. Workflow was started as we did in the browser. This webhook ran with the first name and the last name. And one thing you want to bear in mind while doing HTTP requests is making sure that the HTTP method in the webhook is the same as the method in the HTTP request node that is requesting the webhook. Because at the moment they're the same, right? So it's going to work. The get the same as the HTTP method get in the webhook node. But if all of a sudden this is, say, a post request, we make this to listen for test event, then we test this step as a post request. it will say the resource you're requesting could not be found because this method is not the same as the method in your webhook node. So the way to fix this is making sure that the methods from both the HTTP request and the webhook node are the exact same. So now if we go test step, it will go the workflow started because the methods are the same. So that's something to bear in mind. And also the reason I bring up HTTP requests in sending data to webhooks is because once you know how to use webhooks and HTTP requests together, you can start to create some pretty cool architecturally pretty cool flows is what I'm trying to say. You can create some pretty cool flows once you know how to use the two nodes together, because what you can do is you can do, once this flow is finished, it triggers this flow, then it triggers this flow, and then it triggers this flow. Right, so one flow will only start once another flow is finished. And you'll do that by using a collection of HTTP requests and webhook nodes in N8N. And the last method you can do to send webhook requests is using the terminal. You can make a curl request to the terminal. So you'll go curl space open quote, or just a quote, copy this test URL, paste it in here. You can do the exact same thing, question mark, first name equals Seb, and company name equals having flow. And then make sure to close this URL with a quote, listen for test event, click enter, message was started, workflow was started. Heading back into N8N, we can see here first name and company name is right there under query. One thing I actually forgot to mention in the HTTP request is if we head back into the HTTP request, you can, instead of specifying the data you want to send through the URL, we delete that, just copy and paste the bare webhook. You can send a query parameter. It could be a bit easier this way, just to kind of visualize it. Instead of specifying in the URL, you can do this, last name equals Gardner. And then you can go listen for test event, test this step, and it does the exact same thing. It could be a bit more visually appealing, or be able to visualize better what you're sending within the HTTP request. Lots of HTTPs today. And so those are 3 ways using the terminal, HTTP requests in your browser to easily send send data to webhooks. The most powerful one is definitely HTTP requests. Would highly recommend you guys trying that out within your flows. Much more efficient as opposed to using things like a schedule trigger or or those nodes where it's like once. What's this node? Let's see if I can find the node. Add a trigger, the workflow trigger. When another workflow is executed, it's using webhooks and HTTP requests. It's far superior than using that in most cases. So those are 3 methods you can use along with the path method, but in practice, again, I rarely use that. Now, something else you can specify within here is authentication. So you can do basic auth, header auth, JSON Web Token auth. Again, I'm not going to go into JSON Web Token auth. It's a bit more complicated and not really necessary most of the time. So basic auth, if we create a new credential here, you'll need to specify a user. I'll just do Seb and a password, Gardner. Also a little hack here. To be able to view passwords, this is for any node in N8N. You can change it to expression and then you can view the password. This is helpful when you want to make sure you have written down the right password, because there's no like little I here to be able to view the password. So the way to do that is change it to expression, and then you can make sure you have the right password. So it's pretty cool. And then click save there. And you can click off it. And now what's going to happen is we're going to be prompted to select a password once we have entered or tried or requested this webhook to send data to this webhook. So I want to enter this browser. Oh, there I am. Let me see where this browser is. It's right here. If you click here and then we go first name equals Seb and last name equals Gardner. So as you saw before, we didn't have to enter a password to use this webhook, but now because we've added the basic auth, we do have to. So if we click enter, okay, I need to run the webhook. That is my bad. I need to listen for test event. Test workflow. And then now if I paste this in here, question mark, first name equals Seb and last name Gardner. First. If we click enter here, we're going to be prompted to sign in because we've added that basic auth. So the username was Seb, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's that. And then Gardner. There we go. It executed successfully. Workflow was started. Then you can click save here. Once you click save, you will no longer have to add that password. So if I click save here, I'll no longer have to add that password to use this webhook. You can see here, we've got that first name, that last name. And if I show you again, now that we've saved that password, I copy this into a new tab, paste it, I won't have to use the password again because I've already authorized myself. Now another way, the other authentication method is for the HTTP request and header auth. So if we create a new header auth here, authentication, I'm going to do the same, Seb for name and Gardner. Again, double checking with the expression that I've written the correct thing. And you can click save here, click X, and now with header authentication, what's going to happen is if I listen for test event here in the webhook node, I head over to the other webhook, the other workflow in N8N that holds that HTTP request that we're making webhook requests to previously. If I test this was working before, but if I test it now, it's going to say forbidden. Perhaps check your credentials. Authorization is wrong. This is because we've added that new password to this webhook. And the way we can get access to this is by sending a header. And then this is the name and value. This looks exactly the same as it was in the webhook where we specified the name and the value. The name for us was Seb and the value was Gardner. Now if we test this, because we have these credentials, it will work. Now the workflow was started because we have these credentials that we specified within the webhook node. We can see here, first name and last name. The first name and last name coming from the query parameters we have specified here in the HTTP request. Now those are the two authentication methods I'm going to go over. JSON Web Token, it's a bit more involved. You have to have a key type, secret, and algorithms. So I don't think it's necessary to know that. And now I'm going to change authentication to none because when I'm testing, I always do none. Most of the time. Don't quote me on that. Most of the time. Now, what we can do is use what I'm going to show you is the respond to webhook node. So if we go webhook, because this is when some real magic happens. This is when you can do some pretty cool things. So within the respond to webhook node, you have multiple options on how you could respond to the user submitting data to the webhook. Most of the time I use text because that's when you can submit HTML and redirect the user to a custom web page with dynamic data. It's fully custom to them, which is pretty cool. You can also redirect the user to a website. Maybe it's your website. I'm just going to do the N8N website to show you guys a simple example, a very simple example of what respond to webhooks node actually does. You can respond with no data. You can respond with all incoming items from the webhook. You can respond with binary file with the first incoming item from the webhook. You can respond with JSON. JSON is the same as text really, except in a different format. JSON web token or no data. Actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to respond with all incoming items. So before, when we submitted the webhook, all we saw was the workflow successfully started or something like that. Now it's going to be, the webhook will respond with all of the data that this webhook outputs. So if we run this and we just enter this URL again, this is the same webhook. The webhook, I haven't tested, or is this a different webhook? Webhook. Let me make sure I have the correct webhook, question mark, first name. You don't have to specify this data, but I'm going to. Last name equals Gardner. Webflow could not be started. Ah, yes, okay. When you add the response webhook, this is my bad, you also have to specify the respond field in the webhook node itself and specify using respond to node. Now it will work. If we click enter here, now this is very ugly. We've just been dumped with a bunch of data that this webhook outputted. So it basically it gave us all of this data in the response. And now that we can control what we want the webhook to respond with, you can do some pretty powerful things. So if instead of all incoming items we use text, we can do hello, and we could make this an expression and use the query parameter hello first name and last name. We are now reviewing your request. So if we now do this, we're going to create a completely custom message to the name submitted. So if we go back in here, I'm going to change the first name instead of Seb, I'm going to do John. John, his name's going to be John Duncan. I'm going to Command S to save, Command Enter to run this. Enter this webhook. Now we can see that message we've created in N8N in the respond to webhook node. Hello, John Duncan. We are now reviewing your request. This is the exact message as we had here. So this is pretty cool. You can create completely custom messages. But even further than this, what you can do to completely customize it is, instead of having this text, is you can paste in some HTML. So to show you guys how simple this is, I'm going to show you live. I'm going to ask ChatGPT to do this, of course. Can you create a simple web page? I'm just going to do that for now. Can you create a simple web page? And here we go. Now we can copy this HTML and paste it into this response body. And that's it. And then you can go here again. I'm going to enter this. Welcome to my web page. Just a simple HTML page with some styling. Now what I want to do is I want to change this web page because I just want to give some examples with some dynamic data outputted from the webhook node. So you can click the little, if you click expression in the response body in this little thing down the bottom right, if we find the part of the HTML that says welcome to my web page, welcome to my web page right here, we delete that, and then in this webhook node here, I'm going to close the headers and then go in here. I'm actually going to welcome first name and last name to your custom web page. Then go, Command S to save, enter this, and now I'm just going to enter this URL again. Welcome John Duncan to your custom web page. And you can get pretty advanced with this if we go, can you add some more cool things to this HTML? HTML being the code for the web page. I'm going to provide it with the HTML because I updated it with the dynamic variables. So let's see what it does here. You can imagine how you could be far more in depth and more specific with what you want your web page to look like. I'm being very vague just because I want to keep this nice and quick for you guys. Gonna run this again into this, and here we go. You can see this is pretty cool. You can, with the data that you retrieve from the webhook, you can create a fully custom web page for that person. Whatever data you retrieve, you can use that within the HTML to redirect them to a completely custom page. I've got the current time, 12:43 for me right now. That is correct. What does this do? Thanks for visiting, John. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. And also one thing, sometimes I'll do this. I've done this for some clients in the past. You can embed a webhook behind this button. So, for example, you could once this once this button was clicked, it could trigger another webhook in another flow. You can ask ChatGPT how to do that. You can say, for example, if we delete this, we go first step, webhook, and then you could go test URL, copy this, and then you could say like, cool, with the button in the web page, could you connect the button to this? I'm actually going to make it a production URL. Sometimes it doesn't work with a test URL I found. To this webhook URL to trigger this webhook. And then in doing the production URL, I'll have to turn this live temporarily. So let's see if this did a good job and if it works. So I'm going to go on here, replace this HTML. Then I'm going to go X here. Going to click enter here. So let's see if it's done it correctly. This webhook should be triggered when we look into executions here. We should see another succeeded one here. So let's see, trigger webhook. Failed to trigger webhook. It might need to be a post. Let's try this. Maybe the HTTP methods aren't aligning. There we go. It needed to be a post request. And then if we go into executions here, we can see a second successfully executed webhook. And we can see here, if we actually go copy to editor, what did this data retrieve? Well, it retrieved all of the default browser information. It retrieved the message, the body message, saying that the webhook had successfully triggered the first name, the last name, the execution modes in production, and all this information, which is pretty cool. So, and as you saw before, it didn't work the first time, and that would have been because the HTTP methods did not align. I didn't get told what the HTTP method is, so sometimes you might have to look around and test with different methods to see what one is actually the right one to use. But your two go-to ones to try first would be get or post. And then that's pretty cool. You can trigger a webhook from a custom web page to trigger another flow. You can imagine how you could create completely custom web pages for these people, for these users who submit data to your webhook. So it's a very powerful thing you can do, and very cool. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got a little something out of it. Got to understand webhooks more. They're extremely powerful and I use them all the time. I try to use webhooks as much as I can in N8N because they save executions and they make for a more efficient workflow in N8N, which is ultimately really what you want to be looking for when creating your flows out. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and looking forward to the next one.